This is Michael Woodward, and this is episode 51 of the Jumble Think podcast.
T-minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Welcome to the Jumble Think podcast, a podcast focused on telling the stories of dreamers, makers, innovators, and influencers. Along the way, we'll give you some tips and ideas that you can apply to your big idea and dream and create the world you want to live in. On today's episode, we have Sue Connolly. More about Sue in a moment. On Thursday's episode, we have an incredible guest. Her name is Kelly Roach. She is the CEO of Kelly Roach International. She is a coach, a mentor, a speaker, and an author. She has in the past been an NFL cheerleader for the Philadelphia Eagles, and she is a former Fortune 500 executive. Her story, along with the tips that she gives, will be inspiration for you on your journey. Jumble Think is all about resourcing you with incredible tools and great ideas to help you chase your big idea. We've just launched our resource library. If you go on over to jumblethink.com, click on the resource tab, it'll take you to a place that will have all of the resources from our past guests. Really cool place. It helps support the Jumble Think podcast, our past guests, and also gives you great tools for your journey. Now let's jump into my interview with Sue Connolly. I am super excited about today's guest. Her name is Sue Connolly. She's a filmmaker, documentarian, editor, and producer. In the past, she's worked as an editor and producer for CNN and an editor at CBS. She's worked for some incredible projects and really cool companies. Her new project is called the Petersburg Film. It's a documentary about the town of Petersburg, West Virginia, and more importantly, about the opioid and heroin epidemic that is ravaging so many of the communities around the United States. I really want to encourage you, if you're listening to this episode, to share it with friends and family members. You never know who's hurting or who may be being impacted by these type of issues. And getting this message out, sharing the problems and what's happening is so significant. For years before I started my own company and now the podcast, I worked for a church called the Father's House, and they've worked with recovering meth addicts and other addicts. And these people are incredible people, and more people need to really know about the whole epidemic that's going on. This documentary is powerful. We're going to share a couple things about how you can get involved and really find out more about things you can do both financially, but helping the lives of people around you. So I hope you really enjoy this interview. It's such an important conversation to be had. Thanks for sharing it. Thanks for getting the word out. And let's jump into my interview with Sue Connolly. Sue, I am super excited to have you on the podcast. I'm a big fan of what you're doing and what you're creating right now. How are you doing today?
I'm great. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to talk about it.
Now, you are on a journey to create a documentary about some really important stuff going on throughout the country, but it's really hitting the Midwest and some of the East Coast pretty hard. And that's the opioid and heroin problems that are kind of hitting those communities. Can you tell us a little bit about that project?
Yes, I can. I mean, it unfortunately came to be through an unfortunate event in my own life. And I've lived in New York for a long time, and I had a nephew that lived in West Virginia, and he was introduced to pain pills. I think is how the kids get started down there. I think it was OxyContin, and he was at West Virginia University. And it just seems like the college campus was just rampant with kids doing pills. And as they got harder and harder to obtain, a lot of young people then went to buy heroin because it's so much cheaper and readily available. I mean, you're talking about like $80 to $100 for one OxyContin, which is 4 times the price of heroin, So when you have an addiction, that it's going to take probably about, you're talking about a long time to withdraw from a pill that strong. So you're going to have to put your life on hold for 6 months to a year to really properly recover from that addiction. So for somebody who's, in university or working on a career or, got a really important job or they're in their 20 years old, you don't really think, next year I'll be better and I'll go back to that job or I'll go back to college. You just kind of push away, you just keep moving forward with your life. You just kind of take whatever's necessary to keep going. And for a lot of kids, unfortunately, they went to use heroin for that reason, to avoid, going into withdrawal from something like OxyContin, for example. So that was the unfortunate start to my project. And I guess when I went down to West Virginia, after living in New York, and my nephew passed away in Thanksgiving. So when I went, and I had read in the news a little bit about, there's an opioid problem, it's bad in certain states, certainly West Virginia, Appalachia, Pennsylvania, New Hampshire. I had read this, I work in media, but when I actually arrived in Morgantown, West Virginia, I could not believe the extent of the problem. And that's what shocked me. What shocked me is that, I know investigative journalists, I know reporters, I said I work in media, but there was nobody down there doing anything about it, and I think I wrote to literally everybody I knew at that point saying, oh my God, this is just unbelievable what's happening. You need to get down here now. Everybody needs to get down here now and help these people, because I saw so much pain in front of my eyes and I just could not believe it. So I guess I started documenting what was happening myself, just because I felt like I had to, and that's what gave birth to this project. I moved the focus of my production from Morgantown to a small town in West Virginia called Petersburg. People in Morgantown are very afraid. There's a lot of drugs coming in from out of state, and the people that are bringing them in are people you don't want to mess with, and people were very reluctant to talk to me. They were afraid they would be victimized as a result or targeted as a result of being involved in anything that brought light to this terrible epidemic. So I met this girl who has spent 5 years in federal prison, who was a former drug dealer. And it was shocking to meet her because she was so ready to talk about what she had transformed her life.
Right.
And really wanted to tell the world about what was going on, wanted to make amends for her role in it. And she was just a fascinating character as well. She was the person who I could use to tell the story through, and in this town. So I shifted the focus from Morgantown to small town, West Virginia, and to try and contain this huge story into a small place. But, so it's a small town, but it hints at, bigger things that are nationwide at this point.
And, we're going to dive a little bit more into the movie, but some people listening might have picked up you are Irish. How do you go from Ireland to, you've worked in CNN and CBS, to creating this documentary? What was kind of your journey to bring you here prior to your family member and what they went through?
My journey to where I am now, the long circuitous route. I studied painting in Ireland, and I came to New York City. Really, I think it was just for a summer, but I fell in love with the energy and the sense of possibility. I think I felt like, oh wow, I can do anything here. This is great. So I stayed on, and I got a green card, and I decided to, work in film has always been my love. So I just started working my way up the ladder, starting as a production assistant, to finally production coordinator, production manager, different, commercials and films. And then finally, I made my own films through learning from experience. And then editing has been my career, basically. That's where I worked at CNN and CBS. I worked as an editor, producer at CNN, editor at CBS. And so I kind of put my own films on hold for while I was working on my career, until I really came to this point of, what happened to my family. And that's when I just decided that telling the story was more important than anything else to me, than career or anything. So that's how I got to be where I am today. Yeah.
Well, and you mentioned that there was this girl that you met in Petersburg. That is it Morgantown that you originally went to? Is that right?
Yeah, Morgantown's where my nephew lived, so that is
Yeah.
where I originally went. Yeah. Oh no, I had been to West Virginia before this, but yeah, I guess going there for my nephew's funeral essentially was my third time, and that was when I really realized how bad things were on the ground down there. Yeah.
It's pretty incredible. And tell us a little bit more about Petersburg, the town. Like, how big is it? What's the population like? Is it, we hear about West Virginia, we hear about some parts of Ohio or Indiana, we hear about Western Pennsylvania and being these. I think for better or worse, Trump has, talked about these places as kind of falling apart economically, and there isn't much there, and there aren't choices. Is that really the picture of like Petersburg that you experienced, or what was Petersburg like?
Right. Petersburg is a small town, it's a small rural community on the foothills of the Appalachias. They call it Gateway to the Highlands, and it's the Potomac Highlands, that area. And focused my film on Petersburg and the nearby town of Moorfield and another satellite town called Romney. My co-producer and friend is from Petersburg, so that's where we focus strongly on that town. And yeah, I mean, there isn't much employment at all there, and the poverty, there's a lot of poverty in that area. There really isn't that much for people to do, and it kind of, a lot of them felt like they were forgotten about by the rest of the country. It just felt cut off, remote. You know, the there you don't see that many outsiders. They were surprised who I was and got to know who I was pretty quickly because there weren't that many of me, and
Yeah.
which was surprised me because there's a lot of stories there, and there's been a lot of. I had expected to see press. I had expected people to care. I had expected there to be activists. But there wasn't any of that. It really felt like the world had forgotten them, and I think they feel that. Yeah, there's a chicken plant in Moorfield that employs a lot of people. Very limited options for employment, and there is farming as well, but it's very limited.
So it's a pretty, for lack of a better term, a broken place. The options are limited. The people are feel forgotten.
Yeah, I mean, I would definitely say that they feel forgotten, and you ask, you tell people you're from New York, and they don't even understand where that is, or it just seems like
Wow.
another world to them,
Wow.
something they can't even comprehend. And a lot of people I met, they haven't been to the beach, they haven't. I'm not speaking for everybody in the town, but it just felt like they could really use, a lot of help from outside, activities for kids to do, movie nights at a movie theater, or cultural events, music, workshops, filmmaking workshops. Like, it just really needed, some resources, because I feel like that's contributed largely to the problem of addiction, is that that's an activity for people, and one of the only ones, when you're a teenager. It's what everybody does, and it's startling because the environment is so stunningly beautiful. I mean, it's just one of the most beautiful places I've ever been in my entire life. Just
Wow.
incredible nature. Everywhere you go, it just blows me away. Um, but yeah, I think a lot of people don't get out to enjoy it, can't take advantage of it. Things are expensive, even sporting equipment for your kids, yeah, there's not a lot of money there.
Now you mentioned that you met this young lady who had gone through just getting out of federal prison. Her name's Bree, if I've got that right.
That's
Um,
right, yeah.
Tell us about her. And you mentioned that she's in this season of like she's on the other side of these things, and she's kind of doing this as a way to get the story out. Tell us a little bit about her and how she fits into this story.
Yeah, Bree was a fascinating character. When I first met her, I just was stunned by the things that she was saying because she's such a sweet, kind, beautiful young woman, but she's had this crazy life, and it's quite a contrast when you meet her to hear the stories of her past. She grew up in a household where there was a lot of drug use. In her words, it literally became a trap house, and she lived on the street a lot to avoid going home. There was drugs everywhere, and her parents. It started when her parents separated. I think she was 9 when her parents
Wow.
separated, and then she stayed to live with her dad in what essentially became a trap house. And he tried so hard to get clean. I think that he moved them out of the house a few times. They moved to different places, but it didn't work for a long time. So her childhood was just very difficult. She felt like she had no sanctuary. Then she started to sell drugs herself because that was what you did. I think at one point she told me, okay, this is how I'm going to grow up. I'm going to show you how to work it. So she was like dealt, with what she had, what was in front of her, so she started to buy pain pills and got involved in the pain pill trade, which is how people make money. Well, how some people make money. That's, sometimes the only option for some people. So there was something called the OxyContin Express where people would travel down to Florida because they had more lax laws on giving out pain pills, and they would bring them back to West Virginia and, triple, quadruple their investment. So, enterprising young people, frequently did these kind of activities, and that's how you made money. And she eventually did go to federal prison, once for 1 year, the first time, and then the second time for 4 years. And being away, I think, from all the drug use and all of the exposure to the hardships that were in her life was probably, she would say, the best thing that's ever happened to her, because she completely turned her life around. And she says that she grew up in prison, essentially. She met a lot of older women there that kind of took her under their wing and guided her and educated her. And she was exposed to people from all over the world. So it was also an education for her. She took drug counseling classes. She got her high school diploma, and she was educated in prison, and that's where she turned her life around. So when she came out, she knew that she was never going to go back to the way she was, and she had grown so much. She just wanted everybody else to grow too. And people weren't ready to change. They had stayed in the town, and the town had been on a bit of a downward spiral for the time that she was incarcerated. But she comes out as a fresh new face, ready to embrace the world and help people. But there was a reluctance for people to accept her help, which was very frustrating for her. So she started making videos about babies born addicted, and she started using her voice on social media to try and get attention to the extent of addiction in her part of the world. And that's how we actually met, was through a recovery group. She posted one of her videos on a group called Warriors for Hope, who are based in Charleston.
Wow.
And that's how we started writing to each other. And then I went over there to meet her and interviewed her. This past January was when I first met her. So that's been Bree's story. Yeah.
She sounds like an incredibly fascinating person, and just sounds like a person who has really gotten a breakthrough where she's going to make a difference and change kind of that outlook on how people view these issues.
Yeah, exactly. She's really trying to, spread the word. She actually, I forgot to mention, one very important part of her life is shortly after she emerged from her stint in federal prison, she lost her brother.
Wow.
Who to a drug-related illness. So, yeah, I think that might have been what finally pushed her over the edge to like, I have to talk about this and I have to get the word out. And she was really ready to talk about it. She wasn't afraid. There are people in Petersburg that are reluctant to talk, that are afraid, that feel like there's going to be backlash of some sort. And she was very strong and powerful and willing to use her voice. It was inspiring.
Yeah, it's so cool. Now, tell us a little bit more about the opioid epidemic, because a lot of people, I think, have the stigma that it's just the backwoods. It's just, poor people. But this is actually uh, impacting a larger spectrum of the American population than what most people probably realize.
Yeah, it's huge. I mean, a lot of people are in this country. I think it's something like 60%
Wow.
have prescription drugs in their cabinets. So the problem with the opioid epidemic started when the pharmaceutical companies started marketing pain management techniques back in the late 90s. Companies like Purdue Pharma started asking patients, how do you rate your pain today? It became the fifth vital sign. So, you get a 30-day supply of OxyContin, and that could be the beginning of the end for you, or Percocet or hydrocodone. So this happened all over the country. Now, when the pharmaceutical industry was cautioned and told, when the tide was turned, this is getting a little bit out of control with the pain pills. We have to monitor patients' behavior. We can't give these out anymore. We have to control these substances. They're controlled substances. Then some people, fortunately, could afford to, buy them for $80 a pill.
Yeah.
in wealthier parts of the country, or maybe they have doctors that are still operating, or they've been on this for so long. But younger people, I think that it might have been a little bit harder for them, because doctors were getting into trouble for prescribing them. So people are saying no. And then where do you go at that point? I mean, who can afford an $80 OxyContin? And some people need 3 of them a day.
Wow.
So that's where heroin came into play. I mean, I know I lived in the Hamptons for a while, and it's a problem there too. And you would think a place like that, very, very different from rural Appalachia, would be saved from something like this, but absolutely not. I just feel like some people can still afford to pay those prices for pills, and others can't. So the reason that all of the overdoses started happening is because people are taking to heroin, and the heroin is getting cut with things that are really lethal. So you're seeing overdose rates higher in places like West Virginia, and not so much in the Hamptons. But I would say the level of addiction is nationwide very, very high.
It's really, really sad. Now, you mentioned that in the early 90s that there was a shift in this philosophy of pain management. And one of the questions that you ask in this documentary is, who is the real or true drug dealers? Back in the 80s when I was growing up, you had the Nancy Reagan campaigns going on to just say no to drugs. And we have the stigma of like, oh, the drugs are pouring over the borders. But this is almost a domestic issue that's been born out of our own doing as a country. Tell us a little bit about, as you dug into this, as you researched, as you talked to people, what you found when you really looked into who are the true drug dealers in this epidemic.
Yeah, that is the big question. That is $1 million question. I mean, the West Virginia Gazette did a brilliant story maybe 5 or 6 months ago now, where they obtain records of the amount of narcotics that were shipped in legally. The drug companies shipped them into West Virginia, and I think one town of a few hundred people had something like 9 million pain pills over a certain amount of time, over a few years.
That's crazy.
I have to double check my facts on that, but we're talking about huge quantities of pills shipped to very small rural towns, and obviously the doctors and certain pharmacists were facilitating this kind of craziness, I mean, so the pharmaceutical companies are the ones that I feel personally the most anger towards because, the doctors are responsible. The pharmacists can be responsible. The doctors are going to jail. The pharmacists, I'm not sure they're being sued for sure. But the people distributing the pills and the pharmaceutical companies have not ever gotten prison time over this. They are paying their way out and not accepting responsibility. And then they are touting new statistics claiming that, addiction is a brain disease. Addiction is certainly a brain disease, but that doesn't make you less responsible for what you've done. It's hard for me to think about why somebody like Purdue Pharma would deliberately, like a therapist, psychiatrist would deliberately lie about the addictive properties of a drug to get it pushed into the marketplace. I guess that's the thing I have the most problems with, like how it got to this level. Did they know the misery it was going to create? Did anybody know how bad it was going to get? They knew, they admitted that they lied about this drug, OxyContin. There's a lot of people involved in this great scheme of money making because of narcotics and legal drug dealing. My friend Bree took the fall and went to prison for 5 years in federal prison for her participation in this epidemic. And the doctor in the town of Petersburg was sentenced to 4 years in prison for his role in this epidemic. But no pharmaceutical CEO has yet to has served time or even admitted responsibility. They keep paying their way out. That's a hard pill to swallow. Pardon the pun.
Yeah. Well, and it was interesting. The documentary's not out yet. If I'm correct, you're working on getting it out to the people, and we'll talk about that in a second and how people can help with that. But one of the things in the clip that I saw was the difference in motivation. And this doesn't justify what happened, but Bree's motivation for selling the drugs was because she wanted other people to not have the pain. Whereas like some of these pharmaceuticals or these doctors that are involved in this were doing it either because of greed or because it was easy. Can you talk about the perspective of maybe her motivation versus some of these more corporate-based entities, whether it's at the local level, a doctor or a corporation, and what the motivators are for this?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. What Bree's motivation was. I think it was popularity to a certain extent. Obviously, there was a little bit of greed involved, but it was kind of servicing people that, they needed, with that level of addiction, there's a lot of people that needed to take pills. And if pills were still being taken today, there might be less overdoses. It was when the pills became just outrageously expensive that the heroin came in. Bree actually was selling pills. That's how it started for her. And then how she started dealing heroin was she went to get pills at her usual stores, and they didn't have any more. So they gave her heroin to sell. And that was something that terrified her initially. She wasn't too familiar with it. She's never used it herself and didn't know, how this was going to affect people. So she's 19 years old, and she's involved in selling drugs, like heroin, very lethal. Her motivation was to get by, I guess, as well. Her motivation was never to have somebody change the substance for the rest of their lives. The motivation of pharmaceutical companies, obviously, is to create and maintain customers.
It's just kind of an interesting thought, and it stood out to me, some of her comments, like why she was doing it. It was just really interesting. Let's talk a little bit about the Kickstarter campaign you have going on because, like you said, you are helping Bree and others create this using the knowledge that you have and everything like that. But it's a Kickstarter. It's a community driven, socially driven campaign. Tell us about that, how it came to be, and how people can help.
Yeah, I mean, it came to be because, I felt an immediacy in telling the story. I felt like I can't wait anymore. I have to just, move on this and do it quickly. And I threw myself into the arms of West Virginia, into the community, and I just started spending all my money very quickly. And, I will never regret that. And I will keep spending it if there's any more coming in. Because people are dying at an alarming rate, and people are feeling hopeless and they've nowhere to turn. And there's a stigma still, and a reluctance to talk, and a shame involved with family members. You kind of don't want to admit, as a mother or a family member, you feel like, oh my God, I'm responsible somehow for my son or my child ending up like this. This is, I'm not ready to talk about this. But it's not your fault, and we all need to talk about it now. It's just gotten too far, and too many people are suffering. So my way of dealing with my grief was talking about it and was helping. I needed to help people, and I needed to hug them, and I needed to tell the story. And a lot of people are ready to tell their stories too. Some weren't, some were. So I forced. I had a video camera, and I could hit record, and they could talk to me. And I was like, this is great. You're talking to me. It's helping you. It's helping me. And maybe it'll help the world. Let's just keep talking about this, So then I started a Kickstarter just to keep going because I had just been rifling through all my savings.
Yeah.
And people were responding to it because I think there's a lot of people out there that understand how bad this issue is, that have been affected by addiction in one way or another, and that want to be involved in a project that, by an independent filmmaker that, has just wants to tell these stories, that has no other ulterior motive except just for getting the truth out there and helping people. Be part of a community, talk about these issues, let's get some, let's let the world know, what's going on, and not judge us, help us if you can, help us, because a little bit of love goes a long way, a hug, I care about you, I would say that, and some people were so grateful just for those words, just to be shown that somebody does care. I came from New York, and I didn't know what was going on, and now that I do know, it's going to be my life's work to help people that feel like they don't have a voice, and they feel like they're not being listened to, and their children go to school and are faced with choices every day. Or do I go to the party and take a bunch of pills, or or do I stay at home and watch a movie? It's terrifying. It must be terrifying as a mother or the family member to be in that situation, and you can't move. Take to a different part of the world. You can't go to a different school. You don't have the wherewithal to get up and get your kids out there. You're essentially stuck in this place, and you have to just look over your shoulder all the time, watch your kids, talk to them, and that's why it's really good to get the word out. We're really grateful for all of our Kickstarter supporters. It is a community effort. I want people involved. I like writing to people. I like communicating with people that care about this topic because I care so much about it myself. And I just hope and I have faith that we will get successfully funded, and that people will see our final product, and that West Virginia will get the recognition it deserves.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, we'll put the link to the Kickstarter page in the episode notes, along with on our website, so people can go there and get involved with supporting such a great documentary telling the story of people. One of the
Great.
things
Thank you so much.
Absolutely. One of the things I really wanted to ask you was, as a person who has experience that's gone through the loss of a loved one, and as a person who's come in to this community in West Virginia, what was it that surprised you most about the people you encountered? Because there's a lot of stigma around what a drug addict looks like or what they go through. What stood out to you as like, I had no idea?
Oh, that's a great question. I'm glad you asked me because I really wanted to talk about that because my nephew was an amazing kid. He wanted to be a lawyer. He was at West Virginia University, extremely bright, really handsome, looked like a model,
Wow.
and had everything going for him. And you could say the same for a lot of his friends who had the world was their oyster, you know. There was a lot of, there's pressure, I feel like, on college campuses. There's pills everywhere. Um, yeah, would you look at my nephew and think that, like, oh, he's another, addict? Absolutely not. You would see this beautiful, beautiful boy and think that, like, oh my God, he's
Yeah.
going to go places.
Yeah.
And he lost a lot of his friends as well. I mean, one of his friends passed away on May the 5th. I'm I'm not sure if it's May the 5th or May the 9th, but I remember this young boy telling me that he had lost 6 friends in less than a year, and they were all WVU students to drug overdoses. So, yeah, it does not discriminate. It can affect anybody, and yeah, it can affect anybody. You can never tell, what somebody's going through, and anybody can get a prescription. Anybody can be in pain and end up at a doctor that is more than willing to give them a month's supply, and can refill and keep refilling. And then before you know it, it's just too late, and your life is spiraling out of control. It does not discriminate. It could be anybody. It's everywhere, and it's just getting worse.
Well, I think that leads to another question. I think in our Western philosophy, or at least in modern philosophy, we're waiting for somebody else to fix the problem. Oh, the government's going to step in and do something. Oh, there's going to be a nonprofit or a charity, or uh, somebody else will do it. It's somebody else's problem. Oh, I feel sad about it, but what can I do? What can people do to change this trend and really make a difference in the life of people that are hurting, that need help, and want love?
Yeah, I mean, we are. That's true. People are just thinking, oh, this is so sad. What can I do? Um, there's a lot that can be done. I mean, talking about it really helps. I mean, it depends on what your skill set is. I mean, my skill set was like, okay, I've got a video camera. I can turn it on. I can put it on Vimeo or YouTube. You do what you can. I mean, in your area, I think you can find, you can volunteer at places. You can talk to people that are suffering. You can talk to family members. You can talk to the press. You can talk on Facebook. You can talk to your friends. You can write to editors. You can write letters. You can call your local politicians. We need more rehab facilities. We need resources. We need places for people to go. Needle exchange programs. I mean, there's so much that can be done. There is not enough available for people. The insurance companies frequently just cover 30-day rehab. That's not enough. It needs to be longer. There needs to be more understanding. I think that everybody needs to coach themselves on what can I do to help a young person who's suffering, or an old person who's suffering. What are the right words to say? We never know what's right. We never know what to say. Is it tough love? Should we? Shouldn't we? We need to try and find out how we can help people that are suffering, how we can bring them to care, how we can find resources that help them. I think that sometimes people are at a point in their lives where they don't know. They can't even research, like, where can my insurance take me? What rehabilitation center can I go to? Can I go to meetings? Can I go to NA? Where do I go from here? And I think maybe just there's a man that I have yet to meet who is one of my heroes, who goes around every Saturday door to door in West Virginia, in his community, and all over. I feel like he goes to a different county every week, handing out flyers. This is the number you call. This is the number for help. This is this is a possible rehab for you or your child, or if anyone this is a Narcan kit. Keep it at hand. He goes door to door doing this, and you'll notice that I see that a lot in West Virginia, that people are getting out there, getting on the streets, going, because it's all they have. They're not getting the They're not in Washington marching up and down the street on behalf of addiction. They were on behalf of the president. They are for a lot of other things, but we need to be marching for addiction. We need to get these people help. We need to, stop thinking it's not our problem. It is our problem. It's all of our problems. It's our communities, our people, it's our children, it's our neighbors. We need to fight for them. It's very hard for them to get out and fight for themselves when they're caught up in the hopelessness of addiction, So that's what we can do. We can do all we can. Everything that we can do, we should do it. And talk. Just keep talking and talking until you're blue in the face.
You have a great website that has some clips on there and tells the story of Bree and also shows some of the other people that you've interacted with. How can people find that?
Yeah, you can go to petersburgfilm.com and there's a trailer on there. You can see some of the people involved in our film. You can read a little bit about our project, and I'm going to keep updating it. Or you can go to Kickstarter and just search for Petersburg, and our project will come up. We have like 3 or 4 clips on our Kickstarter page that I think will give you a good idea and insight into what we're doing. And back us if you can, or support us in some way. Write to us, tell your friends, spread the word. Get on board. Together we can beat this thing.
That's awesome. Well, we always end with a couple rapid fire questions that are a little bit broader. So the first question I have for you today is, what are some tips you would give someone with a big idea or a dream, and they just don't know where to start? Maybe it's a documentary like you're doing and the resources aren't there, but they have the skills or something like that. What are some tips you would give them?
I would just say go for it. Turn on your camera. In my case, that was my tool. Launch yourself into what you want to do. And the technical part, there is, depending on the medium that you're using, technical things can get in the way, but nothing is stronger. Your passion translates in your medium. If you have a small camera, if it's a phone, as opposed to infrared camera, you can still get your message out. Your passion will translate. Be passionate. Keep doing it. Work at it. You'll get there.
That's really good. What's one change you'd like to see in the world? Craziness is going on everywhere. What's one change you'd like to see?
I'd like to see compassion in the world. Definitely more compassion for people. I can pay my taxes to help somebody out, no problem. I think that we should employ that, universally, help our neighbors.
I think that's really, really good. What do you want your legacy to be?
If I can help one person get better, have a better life, I'll do it. If I can help more than one, God, yes, thank you for giving me that opportunity to help people, and spreading love and compassion, empathy.
Who or what inspires you?
Love inspires me. My nephew right now is inspiring me on this journey I'm taking. My grandmother inspired me on my first film that I ever made. So love is my inspiration to keep going.
That's really good. What are you currently reading or watching?
I'm not reading at the moment. I have read a lot in the past. Right now, I am working nonstop. I watched The Keeper on Netflix, which I thought was a brilliant docu-series. So that was really interesting.
That's really cool. And the final question I ask every guest is, what is one dream you are still wanting to fulfill in your own life?
Oh, gosh. One dream I'm still wanting to fulfill, I guess it's getting this film made. Once I have this film done and building a community of people for this cause also, I feel like it doesn't just stop with the film. I feel like I'll be working on this cause for a very, very, very long time. And then I feel like I can rest.
It has been truly a privilege to talk to you about something that is so significant. Thanks for taking the risk and jumping out and getting this story out there.
Thank you so much. Thank you for giving me, allowing me to be heard. I really appreciate that.
Well, we wish you the best in this project, the Petersburg Film. It's going to be awesome. And to all of our listeners, make sure you get out there and check out the Kickstarter page. If you can, support it. It's going to be awesome and something worth being a part of.
great. Thank you so much, Michael.
Once again, I want to thank today's guest, Mary Sue Connolly, for taking time to share this amazing story and about her new documentary, The Petersburg Project. Swing on over to jumblethink.com, and in the episode notes, we have the trailer right there, along with links to the Kickstarter page, the website for the Petersburg Project, along with her LinkedIn page. There are tons of ways to get involved with helping people with this addiction problem, getting the story out there about this documentary, partnering with a recovery program. There are so many different ways you can give back and help people struggling with this problem and ultimately become part of the solution for the future. On Thursday's episode, we have another incredible guest. Her name is Kelly Roach. She is the CEO of Kelly Roach International. She specializes in coaching, mentoring, speaking, and writing some really cool books. In the past, she's been an NFL cheerleader for the Philadelphia Eagles, a former Fortune 500 executive. She's got some cool stuff going on with what she's doing now. I can't wait to share that story with you this Thursday on episode number 52. Do you have a big idea or dream and you simply don't know where to start? Swing on over to jumblethink.com. Go to the resources page. You'll find books by our past guests along with some other resources in the near future where you can connect up, find where you can purchase them. And when you purchase them, you help out Jumblethink, you help out our guests, and ultimately you're going to help yourself along the journey to chase that big idea and dream and make it a reality. Once again, I want to thank you for tuning in to the podcast. I hope this episode and our past episodes have helped to encourage you on your journey to create your big idea and dream and ultimately change the world around you. Thanks again for listening. We'll catch you on our next episode.
Et les jambes légèrement espacées. Étirez-vous doucement, mais complètement. En avant, en arrière, sur les côtés. Vous êtes une autre personne. Les mères de famille, les enfants, peuvent également prendre un moment revitalisant. Dans quelques mois, lorsque vous aurez bien saisi la technique et que vous serez maître de votre corps, vous pourrez vous décontracter même en travaillant.